Chapter 2. A would-be author discovers his craft. The fall of 1986 found 11-year-old William entering the 6th grade at Ramblewood Middle School. After spending the summer learning about his family roots, he had a better understanding on his role in life. With Halloween approaching, the school began to offer a writing contest for a scary story, with the grand prize of a weekend pass to the movies, plus a sponsored dinner at the local pizzeria. It was a spur-of-the-moment idea, but after walking past the sign for weeks on end, William decided to take a chance, and soon penned a tale of a park ranger who would become transported between two worlds to witness the Battle of Gettysburg being played in a perpetual loop with ghostly armies. When the judging began during the week of the holiday, he had forgotten about writing the story in the first place, until he was called to see the English teacher. The judges decided that William Brower was to take the grand prize. However, because of the violent content and level of detail written in the story, it would not be placed on display. Instead, a placard reading William Brower, aka Young Stephen King, was hung inside of the trophy case with the other entries. To the socially awkward boy trying to be himself, it was a crowning epiphany when he was compared to an author he admired greatly. It said that high school is the foundation for life in the real world. As William entered 9th grade at J.P. Taravella in the fall of 1991, a chance encounter with a classmate sitting across from him in Earth Science class helped to prove the saying's accuracy. The lecture began on a subject of plate tectonics, which to inspire a story written over the summer he'd already become quite familiar with. Sitting adjacent to him, another classmate was ignoring the lesson and was focused on drawing. He asked the man about drawing a minotaur, and minutes later, as an image was passed over to his desk, a moment of pure inspiration struck William, as he envisioned a world divided by a 10,000-year civil war, full of mistrust towards other inhabitants, but united in a core belief in a chosen one who would arrive at the world's darkest hour. Recalling his maternal grandfather, who kept a burning hatred towards the Japanese people who swore revenge over friends who were killed on board the Arizona during the attack on Pearl Harbor, he developed a warlord eternally hungry for power and conflict. Thinking of his great-uncle's duties during the European campaigns and his reluctance to share many stories, there came another leader steadfast on outward appearances, but battle-weary internally. He titled the story Quest for the Dragon's Bane, and quickly began writing the draft in his next class. By lunchtime, the first main portions of the tale were in place when he recognized a familiar face in the crowd, and soon set with the artist he met a few hours earlier. Rodrigo Negrera and another artist named Dan Sakaro became fast friends with William, and between the three of them, soon created a series of comic book concepts and characters, as well as visual aid to help in the development of the Dragon Bane series. William would contribute by writing down scenarios on paper, which Rodrigo soon transformed into visual art. William would often write scenes down on paper and see if Dan could produce them in illustrated form. When not working with mutants, though, the three of them brought new elements into the Dragon's Bane stories, which by October of that year caught the attention of the school literary magazine, and with Rodrigo's character drawings, soon became a published saga. William began to receive letters of compliments from classmates about the protagonist of the quest, but soon also drew concerns from teachers given the attention to detail during the battle scenes. Before leaving on Christmas break, William was called into the office to meet with the school psychologist, who was referred to him as a potential troubled case due to his interest in the Titanic and writing Dragon's Bane, as well as his constant level of respect and formality he presented to his teachers. William defended himself by turning the tables on the meeting, asking why the school supplied history books in the library if they weren't expected to be read. He pushed the boundary further by stating his interest in the subject before sharing his life goals to dive Titanic and write a book about his experiences there. William entered his junior year and almost immediately began working on the next installment of Dragon's Bane. By now he also had a calendar open with a bet as to how long before he'd be paged to see the school psychologist again. Psychologist report on 11th grader William Brower reads, Behavioral observations and impressions. William presented as a friendly, almost overly polite student. During the break for lunch, for example, he extended his hand to the examiner as he left and commented, "It's been a pleasure." He was very open and honest in describing himself, noting that as a young child he had not been so responsible and blaming himself for his school difficulties. William was a very good worker and responded positively to verbal praise. He is left-handed and grasps the pencil high on the barrel with the index finger writing parallel to the instrument. The variance in William's reading and mathematics achievement is very significant. While reading is actually 1.3 standard deviations above predictive ability, mathematics is 0.67 standard deviations below mental ability expectancy. Over the past 3 years, William has gained 6.5 grade levels in reading, 2.5 grade levels in mathematics, and 3.2 grade levels in written language. Career themes show no strong predictions. William has aspirations for college and then work in writing and/or undersea salvage.
Determination will only take you only so far, and in terms of being a professional writer, the question is, how much are you willing to give up? Many people are always under the belief that it's a very simple thing to do, just sit there and write and get paid. But what they don't realize a lot of times is the amount of effort and the amount of time in order to execute it. For myself, it's always been a running joke. If there's a film that looks pretty good that's going to be coming out to the theaters or even on streaming, 9 times out of 10 I'll have to wait and see when their DVD release is coming out, because I know if I'm working on a project that I'm going to be missing the premiere. And by the time I have everything up and ready and finished, it's already going to be either offline or out of the theaters. I don't mind. It's just the nature of the beast. Especially like here in the age of COVID, and between all the lockdowns and everything else, there's a lot of people that had to readjust and reacquaint themselves into working in an unfamiliar environment. Away from offices, away from people, things along those lines. But for myself, that was no big deal. I'm usually writing sometimes anywhere between 12 to 18 hours a day, depending on the situation, the circumstance, and what the subject entails. So for me, this whole lockdown thing has just been pretty much just another work day. And it's definitely been a little bit more different, obviously. Not very many people are using the telephone as often instead of Zoom and Skype, but that's all right, though, to each their own. I'm bringing all of this down just because of the fact that at the end of the day, it comes down to how much legwork do you want to put into this? How much oil do you want to put on that squeaky wheel in order to see it running properly? And so, for myself, as you can tell from some of the earlier notifications and such during the course of the opening of this video, that particular effort has always been a little bit of a struggle for me. But I've always made it a point to push forward. And even outside of high school and outside of my academic experience, I will have to say, without a doubt, first and foremost, I want to give thanks to somebody, a gentleman by the name of Fred Segustame. When my first book was published back in 2003, none of the bookstores wished to carry it. Even with local press covering it and everything else, they did not like the publishing company that had produced the book. Rather than panicking about it or anything along those lines, most of my friends will tell you that I've always been an out-of-the-box thinker. And, I'm also the type of person who's willing to give full support to whatever it is that I feel can use some extra effort, and especially if it's something dealing with somebody that I'm very close personal friends with. So in this case, Mr. Segustame used to have a little Latin supermarket in our town, right here in my hometown, and every morning I'd go in there and I would always have a cup of Cuban coffee and one of his wife's homemade empanadas. It was always a good way to kick off the day and make sure I had a little something on hand to motivate myself once I get back home and finish writing. So when the book finally came out, to my humbled amazement and still my absolute pride, Fred and his wife wanted to return the favor And so not only did they host a book signing for me, but they turned it into a full wine and cheese tasting event. They actually had reached out through some of their networks and hired a flamenco player who flew into the United States from Peru for a one night only concert just for the customers and for the guests that I was bringing. And to say that it was a successful event was an understatement. Was pleasantly surprised to tell you that the copies that I had on hand, which were roughly about 3 cases worth of books, sold within 15 minutes of what was going to be a 2-hour event. And so, it helped to be have a little team effort in that sense, as well as the extra effort and the motivation. And so, um, even down the road, other friends have helped and contributed, and have always made it a point to push me along and you know encourage me as much as I can. And probably one of the biggest advantages I've had with that would happen to be coming into early 2009 during a moment in my point in life that became one of my own darkest and most challenging of options. Um, Very ironic for somebody who really doesn't drink anything outside of coffee, and almost in a sense of history repeating itself. On New Year's Eve of 2009, I was actually hit by a drunk driver. And so, understandably, my whole left side of my leg and body were pretty much so sprained, shattered, broken, and a few other things. When the airbag deployed, that took out most of my upper teeth and chipped some of the jawline and everything else to that effect as well too. So while I was laying in bed and recovering with multiple casts and everything else to that effect, I had to hear one phrase that was a suggestion by the nurse that normally did not really work for me, and that was to just lay back, relax, and watch television. So instead of that, I went ahead and I forced myself into my wheelchair, and I pushed myself to the computer. And even though it was a little bit difficult, it took time, I went ahead and I used my working fingers and hands to try to punch out at least 3 articles, and I put out 1 book and began working on the second volume of my Dragon's Bane series. So within that time frame as well, in the mornings I used to work in a warehouse. It was called Alliance Entertainment, and I still have lots of fond memories of it between some of my coworkers and my colleagues. And I was the only man in my department, and I was also one of the second youngest people within that particular department. And so my coworkers kind of saw me more as an adopted family member than anything else. And when I had to turn in and get the paperwork emailed over to say that unfortunately I wasn't going to be able to work the freights or handle the hauls from the back of the trucks or anything like that anymore. Uh, they in turn actually put some of their paycheck together, and they literally stopped by the house one morning, and I could tell I still get a little emotional about it, but it's just still a moment of pride, but also just bittersweet. But they came by the house, and they had pulled all their funds and out of their paycheck together, and kind of put a little rally point, and they bought me my first laptop computer, a printer, a scanner, a microphone so I could record things, and 3 different programs on writing, formatting, and editing that I can add into it if I needed it. And they told me to go out and go get that next book taken care of. So that's exactly what I did. By the summer of 2009, even though I was wearing a lot of pants and had to do a lot of covering up in a matter of speaking, because I still had cast brace and things along those lines, I started my next round of book signing gigs, promoting my Dragonsbane series. And, you know, each time would either stand up for about at least a good 20 minutes to half an hour, sometimes longer, and depending on how much strength I had in my leg, and would just keep bucking through. So, it was painful, yes. Successful, yes. Memorable, beyond on these moments and kind of sharing some in-depth little tidbits and memories and reflections with all of you. And that's because things have taken a great major change in my creative sense. And I'm very, very pleased and humbled, but also still laughing in a lot of ways too. Because, again, looking back over the years, especially to some of my friends that I went to high school with and middle school with when I was first breaking into my writing, we often had joked about everything from turning the Dragonsbane series into what we called Star Wars syndrome. And, Dragonsbane action figures, Dragonsbane t-shirts, Dragonsbane posters, animated series, movies, video games, everything else. And within the midst of all those joking, some of it has become reality. If you go to Itch.io, for example, you will find a game based off of the Dragonsbane series. Local archives, newspaper-wise, down here in South Florida, you'll find articles about my friend Paul Valdez and his band actually performing soundtrack to Dragonsbane. All of those jokes aside, and even some of those minor accomplishments have led me to this point in time. And I'm very pleased to say that in the professional writing sense, it is fellowship season. And for those of you who are not aware, this is the point in time where the networks and the studios are looking to fill the writing staff rooms. And so I've actually had the privilege to submit some of my movie scripts into the bigwigs. So I have submitted to Warner Brothers, Universal Studios, Netflix, even have been able to send a proposal to a few other top name directors as well as even pitched ideas to the heads of certain agencies and studio heads and representatives. And so, it's come full circle in so many ways. And has it been easy? No, of course not. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone behind each of my projects, but it has helped to bring me up to this point. It's the encouragement and the motivation of so many of my friends and colleagues that have also helped in balancing that effort and to help push me over to the next step. And so here we are. This is it. This is what I've been doing. This is one of the reasons why so many of you, from those in my friends list on Facebook, this is why I have not been able to answer to many of your text, messenger chats, or anything like that. For our friends that own the local businesses, this is why, precisely, I keep missing some of the events, and why 9 times out of 10 I'm having dinner at 4 o'clock in the morning before going off to bed. But I would still continue doing it. I will continue pushing forward. I don't mind. It's not very often that I can say that I have presented my work to these people. And I say that with absolute pride. And, it's just one of those things. I never really thought of the means of being able to do it before. I have two advantages there. One has been my education through Full Sail and the professors and the instructors who helped me along the way, even took time out of their day to help make sure that my own academic goals were not only achieved but also even enhanced in so many ways, showing me methods and little tips and everything else that helped me to reach what I needed to get done faster and effectively while still conveying my story. And even now, as I'm in my master class, not to be confused with masters, but my master class, on improving my writing, even through here, the opportunities that have presented themselves have been fantastic. And, it's been very, very moving but shocking and fun along the way to say that I've taken a movie script and I've just pitched it to Universal, or Warner Brothers just read my material. You know, these are all things that were at one point just random childhood jokes more than anything else, but it's become reality. These goals have been reached. And so does that mean that I'm finished with everything? Absolutely not. That means that I've already outlined my next set of goals. I have my appointment planner here filled for the next 3 months of exactly what I intend to do with my writing, who I tend to reach out and to share it with, and also a little bit of some tips on what I will need to do in order to connect the bridge and make sure that everything looks good to go before I take it to the next step. Like they say, it's from this point on.